Remove it, or I'll fine you $500 a day until it's gone, said Pamela Dorsey, arms crossed, smile thin and glossy, like the HOA handbook clutched in her fingers. Pam Dorsey, president of the Shadow Pines Estates HOA, stood ankle-deep in the crushed mulch of the newly installed playground, motioning toward the stone just visible near the tree line. That little shrine of yours is trespassing, she added. HOA property. You don't get to keep your dead wife's name etched into our green space. I didn't blink. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, the GPS tracker beneath that stone just pinged back to my satellite account. Her face twitched. For a second, just 1 second, I saw doubt in her eyes. But I didn't press. I let it hang, like the marker, like my wife's name, Sophia Blackwell, still visible on the sun-faded bronze plaque, buried halfway now under a mound of playground rubber and community-approved oblivion. If you're the kind of person who's ever had someone bulldoze a promise, you'll want to subscribe now, because this story ends with blue lights, concrete dust, and an armored convoy. Stick around. Trust me, it gets worse before it gets better. I'm Ethan Blackwell. I was a civil affairs officer in Kandahar. I'm now a licensed geotechnical engineer, and I work under contract with 3 municipalities that trust me to tell them where to build, and more importantly, where not to. This land, it should have never had a playground on it, and Sophia knew that. She fought the board to preserve this patch for a reason. This wasn't a sentimental little grief corner. It was a legitimate conservation plot. Soil too soft for permanent structures, runoff that backed into the stormwater grid, and gas lines just deep enough to avoid notice, but shallow enough to rupture. We submitted the preservation clause through the HOA 5 years ago. Sophia wrote the cover letter. I signed off the soil report. They approved it. Now they pretend it never existed. That garden, the Willow Garden, wasn't just her idea. It was her sanctuary. She called it the part of her that would outlive her diagnosis. We planted the first willow sapling the week she started chemo. When the final MRI came back, she asked to be buried in a military cemetery, but she made me promise, begged me, to let something of her stay here, in this neighborhood, where we first bought a home. That's why there's a bench, a plaque, a native garden bed designed to feed local bees and birds. Or there was, before Pam Dorsey's contractor leveled it with a backhoe 2 nights ago, while the board held a beautification subcommittee meeting half a mile away. I came home to find plastic slides where her name had been. Pam acted like it was a coincidence. A project approved by the board, she kept saying. No personal malice, just updating the green space. But Pam had history with Sophia. Back when Sophia was alive, she'd served on the HOA board. She'd caught Pam misappropriating funds, an illegal landscaping bid disguised as an eco-grant. Sophia resigned quietly, but she took her copy of the board's approval ledger with her. Now that ledger's gone, so are the digital backups. Pam made sure to delete everything that proved this land was protected, except she didn't know about the subsurface marker I embedded under the dedication stone, didn't know that the drainage plans she used had been flagged 4 years ago by the county, didn't know that I still had access to the engineer's stamp she forged on the site plans. She didn't know how far I'd go to protect what Sophia left behind. She was about to find out. The thing about playground rubber? It doesn't mix well with marsh-fed soil. The thing about hiding violations beneath mulch? They surface. And the thing about burying someone's wife without permission? You might just wake up one morning to find your house surrounded. Where are you watching from? Because what happens next? It starts with one phone call. I made the call at 6:17 a.m., not to the HOA, not to the city council. I called the Army Corps of Engineers, because if Pam Dorsey wanted to play games with soil, permits, and federal jurisdiction, then she'd picked the wrong backyard to do it in. I wasn't reporting a fence line dispute. I was reporting potential wetland misclassification and unlicensed structural additions over a designated buffer zone. If you don't know what that means, it means the government gets involved, fast. By 7:03 a.m., my field report and historic preservation scans were uploaded to the Corps' regional intake system. And by 8:14 a.m., I got a one-word email back from their field office lead. Received. That was all I needed. A digital footprint, a start. Shadow Pines looked the same that morning, too perfect. Lawns shaved down to a 1/4 inch. solar-powered lanterns flickering from their overnight cycle. Pam's house, 4 lots up from mine, had the same oversized flag waving in front, her white Lexus parked just close enough to the curb to be legal. But the rot was underneath, and not just in the soil. Pam's war on the neighborhood had started long before she bulldozed my wife's memorial. Bethany Tran's front-facing security cam had been removed for non-conforming visibility violations. The Waltons had to pay a $700 fine because their teenage son left his bike leaning against the garage for an hour during lunch break. She cited people for things like aggressive wind chimes and excessively decorative pumpkins. Control was her currency. The board was her playground before the rubber matting ever went in. Still, people stayed quiet. They always do, until it hits something sacred. And Sophia was sacred to more than just me. Later that morning, I found a note tucked into the edge of our mailbox. No envelope, just folded. Once, printed in 12-point Times New Roman. Saw what happened to Sophia's garden. I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. She didn't either. H.K. Harold Kim, HOA treasurer, church deacon, math teacher, the same man who'd handed Sophia the ledger the night she resigned. The man who never raised his voice at meetings, but always knew when to lower his eyes. I looked up the street toward his house, curtains still drawn. I didn't knock, not yet. Instead, I walked down to the edge of the playground site, what used to be the Willow Garden, and crouched beside one of the freshly poured concrete footings. A butterfly, probably a skipper, flitted between the tall grass near the drainage outlet. I waited until it flew off, then pulled my phone, thermal scan app. It wasn't military grade, but I'd synced it to a buried micro tag last year during Sophia's final chemo round. She thought it was nerdy overkill, but she smiled when I showed her the blinking dot. Said she liked knowing her name would always ping back from somewhere. It was still pinging, but it had moved, 12 feet south, beneath the swings. Pam hadn't just buried the plaque. She'd had it excavated and relocated without permission, and without any record filed, which meant she either knew exactly what she was destroying or thought it was safer to hide the evidence than risk the wrath of a grieving engineer with a GPS signature and a backbone. That's when I heard it. "Hey!" The sharp bark came from across the green. Angela Ford, HOA secretary and Pam's most loyal foot soldier, was marching toward me with a clipboard and phone out. "Residents aren't allowed to loiter near active construction," she said, snapping a photo before I could even stand. I didn't flinch. "You're on Phase B soil," I said, her brow furrowed. "Phase B?" she echoed. "This isn't an HOA green space anymore," I told her. "It's under pending federal review, which means every photo you just took might become evidence." She hesitated, only for a second, but I saw it. The shake in her hand, the uncertainty in her step as she turned and stormed off. The board thought they were dealing with a grieving widower. What they didn't realize was that I hadn't started grieving yet. And when I did, I didn't sit in silence. I dug. Next stop, the church lot behind the HOA office. Because I knew someone who parked there every Tuesday after 3 p.m., and I was done waiting for answers. I crossed the street from the playground and walked toward the rear lot of St. Matthew's Church, where the HOA rented a small office space for community outreach. 3 cars sat parked under the shade of an old oak, a minivan, a silver Camry, and the blue hybrid I'd been waiting for, Harold Kim's car. He was the one person on that board who hadn't yet picked a side, at least not openly. He was leaning against the hood, head down, scrolling his phone. His tie was loosened, sleeves rolled up past the elbows. A clipboard lay on the trunk beside a styrofoam coffee cup. His foot tapped once, twice, then stopped when he saw me. For a second, he looked like a man caught between 2 exits. I raised my hand, palm out. No sudden moves. Just approach slow. "Harold," I said quietly, "you left a note." He swallowed hard, straightened his glasses, then immediately looked away. His shoulders lifted and dropped, like a silent sigh. He didn't confirm or deny it. He just rubbed the back of his neck, eyes darting toward the church door, as if expecting someone else to come out. I stopped a few feet from him, the gravel crunching under my boots. The church bells were silent now, but a faint hum from the HVAC unit filled the gap. "I'm not here to put you in the middle," I said. "I just need to understand what Pam's done." His thumb worried at the edge of his phone case. He started to speak, then closed his mouth. Sweat dotted his temple even though the air was cool. His heel scraped the pavement in a nervous half circle. Everything about him screamed hesitation. Not cowardice, but calculation. He knew more than he was supposed to, and he hated it. "I saw the ledger once," I added, careful to keep my voice low. "The night Sophia resigned, you handed it to her, remember?" He flinched at her name. His fingers twitched like he wanted to cross himself, but thought better of it. He turned slightly, putting one hand on the car roof, staring at the paint as if it held the right words. Finally, he muttered, "You shouldn't be here." I leaned against the opposite fender, keeping my distance. "Neither should that playground. It's Phase B soil under federal review." That made him glance up, eyes wide behind the glasses. "You, already?" he whispered. I nodded once. "Filed this morning. Corps has the data. They'll start their own sampling soon." Harold's hand slipped off the roof. He took a step back, rubbing both palms down his slacks. "Pam thinks she's untouchable," he said, but so quietly it could have been to himself. His gaze flicked toward the church door again. "She's been moving money, bids that never existed, and she told me the garden was a liability. Said if we didn't clear it, insurance would drop coverage after that storm drain overflow last fall." He stopped. His jaw tightened. The conflict was visible, right there in the tremor of his lip, the way his knees bent slightly as if bracing for a hit that never came. He wanted to help. He also wanted to keep his life exactly as it was. "I can't lose my job over this," he said finally. "My kids are in college. My wife, she's sick. He broke off, looking at the church cross mounted above the office door. His knuckles whitened around the phone. "You don't have to lose anything," I said softly. "You just have to tell me where she moved the stone. I already know. It's not where it should be." He closed his eyes for a beat, exhaling slow. When they opened, they were glassy but sharper. "Check the storage shed behind the maintenance lot," he murmured, still facing the cross. "She had them pull it last night. Said she'd handle disposal personally." I stayed silent, letting him have the space. He pocketed his phone, adjusted his tie back up to his throat, and finally looked at me straight on. The tremor in his foot stopped. He wasn't steady, but he'd chosen. "I never gave you this," he said. "You understand?" "I do." I stepped back. "This isn't over, Harold, but thank you." As I walked away, I glanced back once. He was still leaning on the hood, but now both hands covered his face, shoulders shaking, not with tears, but with the kind of silent fury that comes when you realize you've been complicit too long. The maintenance lot sat at the far edge of shadow pines, where the sidewalks ended and the perimeter brush thickened around the old irrigation pump house. It wasn't on any tour of the neighborhood, just gravel, weeds, and a corrugated metal shed marked authorized personnel only. Pam liked to call it the overflow zone. I parked 2 blocks away and walked in through the side trail. No cameras, no foot traffic, just the low hum of insects and the faint whine of a loose vent flap vibrating in the wind. I circled the shed slow, padlocked, bolted at the base. But it wasn't locked this morning. A thin wedge of gravel still held the impression of tire tracks, new, shallow, not yet washed out by the sprinklers. Pam had been here. I stepped around back and there it was. A half-dug square in the dirt, tarp peeled halfway back like an afterthought. The bronze plaque lay at an angle, face down, edges caked with wet soil. The anchor bolts had been snapped off. One corner was bent where someone had tried to force it loose with a crowbar. She hadn't just relocated it, she tried to destroy it. I crouched beside it, brushing dirt off the edge of Sophia's name. My fingers trembled, not from grief this time, from restraint. I could still hear Sophia's voice from the day we installed it. "If it ever fades, promise me you'll restore it, not replace it. I want what's real to stay." The scratches weren't deep enough to erase her name, but they were deliberate. Someone tried to scrape her off the surface of this community like she'd never existed. A car door slammed behind me. I turned fast, instinct kicking in from years deployed overseas. A black Audi idled at the edge of the lot. The passenger window slid down. Pam's voice called out before her face came into view. "Taking souvenirs now," she said. "That's theft, Ethan." I stood, letting the tarp flap fall back over the marker. She stepped out slowly, heels sinking slightly into the soft ground. "No cameras out here," I said. "Not very HOA of you." "I was notified of a trespasser on common property," she said, lips tight. "Turns out it's just you, grieving again." She gave a performative sigh, then started walking toward me. "You're not on the board," she continued. "You have no standing to interfere with board-authorized improvements. The playground was approved unanimously, Ethan. If you're still upset about your wife's little garden, there are proper channels." "She filed the conservation clause," I said. "It was signed, entered, and recorded. You bulldozed a protected zone." "Which the board rescinded after safety concerns," she snapped. "Outdated environmental scans, unauthorized objects. There was no longer any liability coverage on that plot." She reached into her bag and pulled out a glossy packet. Printed photos. Surveillance stills. One of them showed me near the playground the previous morning, circled in red. "You're creating a pattern," she said. "You've been photographed twice on active installations. If something happens to that playground, your name will be first on the claim." That's when I saw it. The letterhead in her file folder. It wasn't from the board's usual law firm. It was some pop-up compliance office out of Arizona, not the HOA's authorized counsel. "You're bluffing," I said quietly. "You didn't file new plans. You didn't run permits. You hired an unlicensed crew." She smiled like I'd just complimented her haircut. "Proof, Ethan, or none of this matters." I leaned in slightly. "It will. You're about to find out just how fast environmental violations surface, especially when the land under your feet belongs to the federal grid." She froze, just for a second. Victory strategies don't start with screaming. They start with hesitation. That half-second pause, that was my first real gain. She tucked the packet away, turned, and walked back to her car without another word. When she drove off, I reached under the tarp one last time and took Sophia's plaque into my arms. I didn't take it home. I took it to the city inspection office, public property intake window, and signed it in as evidence of municipal destruction. Because now, it wasn't just a symbol, it was a legal object of record. Pam Dorsey hadn't just buried my wife's name. She'd vandalized a structure marked on federal urban renewal maps. And I had the bent bronze, GPS logs, and excavation timestamp to prove it. The evidence clerk at the Fort Lauderdale City Inspection Office didn't ask many questions. Just logged the intake form, attached a barcode, and slid the plaque into a locked cabinet behind the glass. "This will be reviewed in the next cycle," she said flatly. I nodded, handed over the GPS tag data, and signed the chain of custody form. I wasn't counting on local bureaucracy to save me. I just needed the first stamp, a time-anchored public record that the item existed and had been recovered from an improperly managed site. Because the thing about wetlands, violations, and playgrounds is this. Once an environmental complaint is flagged in a federal drainage corridor, the next level up gets notified automatically. And that meant EPA Region 4. It also meant I had about 72 hours to get the right eyes on the ground before Pam tried to vanish the rest of the damage, or fake a backdated permit trail. I left the building just before noon and headed straight to the old civil planning archive 2 blocks away. It used to be part of the public library until the city gutted everything analog in 2018. Now it sat half-used, a hollowed-out floor of forgotten blueprints and unpaid interns guarding water-damage filing cabinets. But I didn't come here for the papers. I came for Amira LaRue, the woman who designed the first stormwater overlay of this neighborhood, before the HOA even existed. She was pushing 70 now, short, sharp-eyed, with a tremor in her left hand from early-onset Parkinson's, but a memory like a steel trap, and she hated HOA boards. "Shadow Pines," she said when I showed her the excavation photos. "That's the marshland subdivision. We flagged Phase B as non-permissible for permanent development. That was the clause, clear as daylight." I pulled up the satellite overlay on my tablet, showed her the current grading contours, and pointed out the new playground pads. "That shouldn't be there," she muttered. "Those drains weren't rated for compressive use." I leaned in. "Can I get that in writing?" She gave me a look. "I'm retired. I don't testify." "You don't have to," I said. "Just give me your original site report, the one with the Phase B slope restrictions." She hesitated, then stood up, shuffled across the back room, and pulled open a drawer with a squeal like a dentist drill. When she returned, she handed me a rolled-up Mylar print sealed in a dated inspection tube. "Last copy," she said. "City never digitized these. I suggest you don't lose it." I didn't. I took it straight to a digital mapper and scanned it into 3 formats: PDF, CAD overlay, and satellite grid fusion. Then uploaded the lot into a time-stamped public GeoServer account I'd kept since my days doing Army infrastructure assessments. That gave me something Pam couldn't tamper with: a live, accessible environmental baseline predating all HOA board decisions. Back at home, I downloaded the HOA's annual report from their site. Tucked in the back was their so-called permit for community upgrades, signed off in April by someone named L. Weatherford, Senior Environmental Officer. I searched the city's planning office directory, no Weatherford. Then I ran the name through an EPA registry. Nothing. Then finally, on a whim, I ran it through LinkedIn. Bingo, Leanne Weatherford, freelance compliance consultant, Scottsdale, Arizona, Pam's bluff firm. She wasn't a government official, she was a freelancer who sold compliance letters to shady boards. The permit was junk, and if that fake authorization ever touched federal soil, that's wire fraud, environmental fraud, and potentially criminal conspiracy, if proven under the EPA's Clean Water Act jurisdiction. I recorded a screen capture walkthrough of the evidence chain, starting with the original soil map, through GPS logs, footage of the plaque's excavation, and ending with Pam's HOA report and the falsified permit. Then I drafted a secure email and sent the whole package to Detective Carlin Nguyen, head of the Fort Lavelle Environmental Crimes Unit, along with a subject line I knew she couldn't ignore: flagged stormwater zone converted without permit, evidence of HOA fraud, PLARS, improper excavation, urgent review requested. This wasn't just about Sophia anymore. Pam had gone from pettiness to federal liability, and she didn't even know the fuse was lit. By the time the EPA called back, I'd already started sketching the hydrology damage forecast they'd need. Because when you break the ground under a memorial to a woman who fought to preserve it, the land remembers, and so do the right people. The call came at 9:42 a.m. the next morning, blocked number. I let it go to voicemail, then checked the transcript. "This is Special Agent Maya Ellison with the Environmental Protection Agency, Region 4. We've reviewed your submission. I'm initiating a preliminary site verification under Federal Code 33 U.S.C. Paragraph 1-1251. You'll be contacted within 48 hours for a ground inspection. Do not disturb the area further." I just stared at the message. My chest didn't rise for a full 10 seconds. Then I breathed, slow, sharp, and clear. They were coming. This wasn't a complaint ticket anymore. It was now a federal event. Once the EPA logged a site under Title 33, everything about it, its use, its records, its water runoff impact, became a matter of federal interest. If Pam so much as moved a bench in the next 2 days, she'd be tampering with a monitored zone. But she didn't know yet, and I wasn't going to give her time to regroup. I forwarded the voicemail to my off-site encrypted email and printed the waveform ID from my binder. I knew Pam's next move would be to scrub every trace of that playground's violations, erase the falsified permits, bury the crew logs, maybe even bribe her way into city council silence. So I moved first. I drove straight to Corvin Elementary, where the HOA held its next Community Enrichment Day. It was their PR stunt: pamphlets, snacks, photo ops with new installations. On the flyer, it claimed the playground was an environmental safe, child-forward project celebrating Earth Week. My stomach twisted at the irony. I parked across the street, stayed in the car, and watched from behind tinted glass. Angela Ford stood near the bounce house with a clipboard. 2 board members from Phase A posed in front of the playground sign. And then Pam stepped out of her Lexus in a bright coral suit, grinning like a mayor on ribbon-cutting day. She had no idea what was coming, but someone else caught my eye: Harold Kim. He was standing off to the side, near the juice table. No clipboard, no smile, just arms crossed, head slightly down, watching the others like he'd rather be anywhere else. I got out and walked across the lot toward him. The bark chips crunched underfoot louder than usual. He looked up and froze when he saw me. "I know," I said before he could speak. "You're scared." He didn't nod. He didn't have to. You told me where she buried the plaque, I continued. That mattered. It's in custody now. You helped. His voice was low. Pam's saying she got state approval, that the garden was never official. She's printing new signs, pretending this was always a beautification project. She's rewriting the minutes. I pulled out the printed scan of Amira LaRue's original soil overlay, handed it to him. His hands shook slightly as he took it. That's the original, stamped, pre-HOA, pre-Phase B. She can't erase it. Harold's eyes widened as he traced the contour lines. He was reading more than a map. He was seeing how far Pam had pushed them into criminal territory. I leaned in, lowering my voice. The EPA is inbound, I said. Within 48 hours. When they arrive, they'll ask questions. They'll subpoena records. They'll trace permits and contractor payments. Harold's breath caught. And they'll know who helped, I added, or who looked away. His jaw tightened. He didn't answer, but he didn't walk away either. Then I turned to leave, but stopped. Harold, I said, without turning around, if you've got anything, emails, payment approvals, real meeting notes, now's the time. I walked back across the lot. The bounce house inflated and squeaked behind me. Laughter bubbled from kids too young to understand how fragile safety was. I looked back once, Harold still staring at the map, lips moving like he was whispering something to himself. I didn't know if he'd crack, but the seed was planted. He'd seen the line. He knew she crossed it. Back home, I opened my laptop and wrote a single update in my log. EPA notified. Witness contact solid. Community event observed. She's still smiling. But by the end of the week, those smiles would freeze behind glass. Because when you pave over a grave and call it progress, the dirt always rises, and the law follows. I was still staring at my log entry when the email icon blinked at the corner of the screen. No subject line, no sender name, just a string of numbers. I clicked before I could second-guess myself. Inside was a single line of text. Meet me at the public library's second-floor study room after closing tonight. I can't do this anymore. Then nothing, no signature, but I knew the cadence. Harold Kim. By 8:55 p.m., the main lights of the Fort Lavelle Public Library were off. Only the security sconces glowed along the walls, throwing long bars of light across the carpet. The smell of old books and dry air conditioning clung to everything. My footsteps were the only sound as I made my way to the second floor. Harold sat at the back table, head bent over a manila folder like a student cramming for finals. His jacket was off, tie loose, fingers pressed to his temples. He didn't look up until I was a few feet away. Even then, his eyes stayed fixed on the tabletop. "You're late," he murmured. "Building closed at 8. I had to slip in," I said quietly. He exhaled, long and shaky. His hands moved to the folder, but didn't open it. His foot tapped under the table like a clock he couldn't shut off. "I can't keep doing this," he whispered. Pam's gone too far. And if the EPA shows up, they'll drag the whole board under with her, even the ones who just signed what they were told." I pulled out a chair, sat across from him. "Then stop signing, start telling." He laughed once, bitter, then rubbed his eyes. "You think it's that easy? My name's on the transfers. On the meeting minutes she rewrote. Every time she moved a bid, she used my account to approve the payment. She said the treasurer's signature was just a formality." His voice cracked. "It's not. It's a felony." He finally looked up at me. His eyes were rimmed red, not from tears, but from sleeplessness. "My wife's chemo costs more every month. My kids need tuition." She knew all of it. She made me choose between survival and silence. He pushed the manila folder across the table. His hands shook as he let go. Inside were copies of wire transfers from HOA accounts to a shell landscaping company. Names of contractors who never existed. Payment approvals for wetland removal, stamped with his digital signature. And at the top, a memo from Pam to the board warning them to destroy outdated soil reports before EPA audit risk escalates. I felt the air change in my chest. This wasn't just leverage, this was the artery of her scheme. "You kept all this?" I asked. "I copied it to my personal drive every time," he said. Couldn't bring myself to delete it. Felt like maybe I'd need it to prove I wasn't the only one. He rubbed his palms together, staring at the wood grain of the table. "You said the EPA's coming. That true?" "Within 48 hours. He nodded slowly, like each word was a weight. Then you'll need this too. He reached into his jacket pocket and slid out a USB drive. Board meeting recordings, the real ones, before she cut them for the minutes. She told members we were correcting typos. She was deleting entire motions. He shoved it toward me like it was radioactive. If this goes public, my career's over. My family's name? Harold, I said, voice low but steady. You're not the criminal here. You're the witness. And you're about to become the reason she goes down cleanly instead of dragging the rest of you into court. His foot finally stopped tapping. His shoulders slumped like he'd been holding up a roof for too long. He whispered, I'm scared. I know, I said, but you've already done the hardest part. You chose a side. We sat there in silence for a long moment, only the hum of the HVAC filling the gap. Then he straightened his tie, gathered his jacket, and stood. Tell them I cooperated, he said. When they come, I'll testify if I have to. He walked toward the stairwell without looking back. The manila folder and the USB drive sat in front of me like a loaded weapon. This was no longer my fight alone. The USB drive was cold in my hand as I left the library. I didn't take it home. I drove straight to a small co-working space I'd used during city consulting jobs. Neutral ground with secure fiber, no connection to my home IP, and no chance of Pam's people sniffing traffic. I plugged the drive in and opened the first folder. There were 5 subfolders labeled by board meeting dates, 6 months worth. I clicked on the oldest one. The audio was clean, no edits. And if we move the permit approval to a subcommittee vote, we avoid the full board audit, Pam's voice said crisply. We'll bury the old maps under emergency maintenance minutes. My hand hovered over the mouse. The words were surgical. Not casual corruption, intentional manipulation, with legal insulation. I opened the next folder. This one had Harold's voice, strained and uncertain. I still don't think we have the authority to remove that plot, he said. The garden was designated conservation. Pam cut him off. It was never officially stamped, she said. Besides, she's dead. The optics favor a family healing space. You really want to argue with a swing set? My stomach turned, but it wasn't anger anymore. It was calibration, measurable, targetable momentum. This was how I won. I isolated 6 clean excerpts from the audio. Pam admitting to backdating minutes, Pam ordering a vote off record, Pam acknowledging the land's original classification, and her plan to quietly sunset the old soil reports. I loaded them into a secure folder, time-stamped each clip, and uploaded the entire package to a new encrypted transfer addressed to Special Agent Maya Ellison at the EPA. Subject line, Audio Evidence of HOA Permit Manipulation, Shadow Pines Phase B. I also CC'd Detective Carlin Guyen, adding a note. Board member witness has come forward, full digital evidence and financial records included. This is now a coordinated fraud and environmental compliance case, urging immediate site hold. By 11:03 a.m., I received a read receipt from both inboxes. The strategy was no longer in motion. It was locked. Now came the preparation phase. I left the co-working space and headed to the Community Wellness Center, the only other neutral site in the neighborhood. Pam wouldn't step foot there unless there were cameras, but Harold would, and I needed to secure his statement before his nerves cracked again. Inside, I booked a private room and called him from a number he wouldn't recognize. Yeah, he answered after the second ring, voice tired. I've sent the files, I said. EPA and Environmental Crimes Unit both confirmed. You're in the clear, as long as you stay consistent. Silence. Then, you think they'll actually show up? They will, I said. But you'll need to verify your side. They'll want backup, logs, times, context for those approvals. I have it all, he said. I need to know this ends clean. I'm not built for scandal, Ethan. No one is, I said, but you're built for truth. You prove that. He hung up after a quiet thank you. Next, I turned to the EPA complaint form logs and submitted a supplemental notice of hydrology interference with attached images of the storm drains backing up after the playground install. These weren't from me. They came from Bethany Tran, our neighbor 2 houses down, who had messaged me privately after the garden was bulldozed. Didn't want to get involved, she wrote, but my basement flooded twice since they poured that rubber matting. I checked my ring cam. Water started pooling the day after the garden was flattened. She attached 3 clips, I included all of them in the EPA log and marked her as an anonymous secondary witness. Then, I printed flyers. Not to distribute, yet, just to be ready. They read, "Did you know? The playground may be in violation of federal environmental law. If you've experienced drainage issues, flooding, or HOA fines for speaking out, you may be protected under federal whistleblower statutes." At the bottom, a QR code linking to a secured community interest survey I'd built through a proxy platform. No names, just submissions from neighbors who were tired of Pam and scared to say it aloud. Before midnight, I had 6 anonymous entries. We asked about the drainage and got a warning letter. I was told I couldn't plant new hedges unless I donated to the board's beautification fund. My teenager got written up for posting a photo of the playground flooding. This wasn't just strategy now, it was momentum. Pam had built her empire on silence, but now the walls were creaking. By morning, the survey had jumped to 13 responses. 3 more mentioned unexplained fines. One said they'd been told their mailbox design was un-American. Another included a screenshot of an HOA warning email with Pam's digital signature. The subject line read, "Tone down your lawn decor. Consider the neighborhood." But the real gift came from one anonymous entry marked simply, "I was part of the playground build. She paid us under the table." There it was. I logged the timestamp, noted the phrasing, and traced the IP range. Not to dox anyone, just to verify location. It was from inside Shadow Pines. Whoever sent it lived here. Pam's system wasn't just corrupt, it was leaking. And with the EPA site inspection likely within hours, it was time to tighten the noose. I headed to a neutral cafe on the edge of the neighborhood. Cinder House Coffee. Quiet, half empty on weekdays. I booked a corner booth, connected to their private business-grade Wi-Fi, and started the final data synthesis. Every element of the case needed to be layered for federal review, chronological, mapped, and sourced. So I built 3 files, visual timeline PDF, side-by-side photos of the Willow Garden before demolition, mid-bulldoze, and the playground after, overlaid with GPS tag history and time-stamped environmental readings. Audio-visual companion drive, 6 raw audio files from Harold's USB, plus ring footage of Pam issuing verbal orders to contractors pulled via neighbors' anonymous submissions. Interactive drainage map, synced stormwater grid, overlays from original city soil maps, courtesy of Amira LaRue, paired with thermal drone footage I'd recorded a week ago showing saturated soil under the rubber padding. Every file was cross-linked and embedded with hash-protected metadata. No forgery, no tampering, everything verified. Then came the final step, execution control. I logged into the encrypted portal the EPA provided for whistleblower filings and uploaded the entire bundle under the same case ID Maya Ellison had initiated. Then I messaged her directly. All data now submitted, witness confirmed, physical evidence in custody. I believe imminent enforcement is justified. Please advise when team is inbound. We'll coordinate with affected residents. I hit send and leaned back. Across the cafe, a barista refilled the pastry case. The grinder hummed. A couple chatted over a shared laptop, oblivious. But in my head, I could already hear it. Not the chaos, the shift. Because once you hand the truth to the right people, and it's locked in record, there's no more asking for justice. You force it into motion. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. "This is Agent Ellison," came the voice. Calm, clipped, efficient. "Your file was reviewed. We're dispatching a joint field unit within the hour. You will not be contacted again until after initial site entry. Keep the area undisturbed." I stood, packed the laptop. "Understood. And Mr. Blackwell," she added, "you did the right thing." Click. No ceremony, no dramatic build-up. Just consequences. I stepped outside into the sharp morning air. Sunlight cut through the trees lining the sidewalk. The same trees Sophia used to count when we took walks after her infusions. Each one a small promise that the neighborhood was still alive. I got in my truck and drove straight to the community garden lot next to the HOA office. That space had always been treated like a low-priority plot. Wild herbs, neglected mulch paths, but now it gave me clear line of sight to the playground zone. From there, I watched the routine unfold. Pam, in her usual power walk, arrived at 10:17 a.m., sharp, clipboard in hand. She barked at a maintenance guy, pointed toward the edge of the swings, then gestured to Angela Ford, who trotted over with a box of files. That was her move, last-minute cleanup. She knew something was coming. She just didn't know how far in it she already was. At 10:44 a.m., two unmarked SUVs rolled slowly down Sycamore Lane. They passed the main intersection, turned into the HOA's restricted parking lot, and came to a silent stop behind Pam's Lexus. Both drivers stepped out, clean suits, utility belts, EPA badges clipped high and visible. They didn't knock. They didn't ask. They walked toward the playground with purpose, and behind them, trailing just a few car lengths back, was a matte black Fort Laval SWAT van. Pam turned. She saw them. Her smile froze. This was the beginning of the end. Pam didn't move at first. She just stood there, halfway between her Lexus and the EPA agents crossing the mulch, like she was waiting for someone to explain what was happening. But no one did. One of the agents, Ellison herself, pulled a laminated map from her case and held it up against the playground fence. Her partner knelt beside the base of the rubber matting and pulled out a compact soil probe. Pam's mouth opened like she wanted to object, but no sound came. That's when the SWAT van door opened. 3 officers stepped out, tactical vests labeled Fort Laval Environmental Enforcement Task Force. Not military, not riot gear, but built for one thing: site seizure and evidence protection. The crowd started to gather. Moms with strollers paused mid-step. 2 joggers slowed to a walk. A couple of teenagers filming from across the sidewalk held their phones just high enough to catch the scene. Pam turned fast, motioned frantically to Angela. I couldn't hear what she said, but Angela's face said everything. Pale, eyes darting. She stepped back like she didn't want to be near the epicenter when the fuse went off. By 11:06 a.m., yellow EPA site control tape was up. The entire perimeter of the playground cordoned. I stepped out of my truck and walked, slow, direct, through the crowd now whispering like a hive of bees. Pam saw me approach, her expression twisted into something half snarl, half smile. "You did this," she hissed, stepping in front of me before I reached the tape. "You dragged federal agents into a neighborhood dispute." "Dispute?" I asked. "You bulldozed a memorial garden protected under conservation zoning. You buried a bronze plaque. You forged environmental compliance letters and paid unlicensed crews off the books." Her nostrils flared. "You can't prove any of that." "I don't have to," I said. "The federal government can." She looked past me, saw Harold standing at the corner, not hiding anymore, a clipboard in his hand, watching everything. He didn't flinch when she locked eyes with him. He just nodded, once. Pam turned red, then white, then something in between. Agent Ellison approached, speaking into a comm device on her shoulder. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to step away from the perimeter. This is now a restricted federal work site under provisional enforcement order." Pam didn't move. "I'm the HOA president," she said. "This property falls under my jurisdiction." Ellison didn't even blink. "Not anymore." She handed Pam a folded document. "This is a site seizure notice under EPA Code 4209. We have reason to believe this land was altered in violation of the Clean Water Act and federal wetland protections." Pam opened the paper, scanned it like she expected a loophole to jump out and save her. None did. Behind us, 2 more officers unlatched a gate near the swing set and began driving metal rods into the soil. Soil sample flags popped up like thorns in a garden. Then came the moment that sealed it. One of the agents stood, holding something in a plastic bag. I recognized it instantly. The corner of Sophia's plaque, the part Pam had bent with a crowbar. It had been dug out of the mulch under the play structure, not from the shed, not moved to safety, not stored, just hidden beneath dirt, rubber, and denial. Ellison looked at it, then looked at Pam. "You're now being placed under environmental fraud review. You are not under arrest, yet, but you are not to leave the county during active investigation." Angela stepped back again, almost tripping over the curb, and Pam broke. Her voice cracked as she shouted, "You think you're heroes? This was for the community, for the children." A neighbor near the front, Bethany Tran, spoke up from behind her stroller. "Then why's our street flooding?" she said flatly. "Why's my basement wet?" A few others murmured agreement. I stepped forward, just past the tape, and locked eyes with Pam. This wasn't about the kids, I said. This was about control, and you lost it. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't need to. They simply stood there, watching her unravel, and that was more powerful than any applause. The emergency HOA board meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. sharp, but the community room at the Shadow Pines Recreation Hall was already full by 6:42. Folding chairs spilled into the hallway. People stood along the walls, arms crossed, faces tight with questions. A local news van idled outside, its dish angled skyward like a listening ear. The banner at the front read, "Special Session, Community Safety and Updates." No mention of the EPA, no mention of Pam's federal site seizure notice, but everyone knew why they were there. Pam sat at the center of the table, flanked by Angela and 2 remaining board members. Her coral blazer was gone, replaced with something darker, more formal. She looked smaller now somehow, like her voice might not carry across the room anymore. Harold sat 3 chairs down, clipboard in his lap. He didn't look at her. I stood near the back wall, arms crossed. I didn't need a podium tonight. This wasn't my forum anymore. It belonged to the people Pam had silenced. She cleared her throat and leaned into the mic. Thank you all for attending. I know recent events have been unexpected, but I want to reassure you that the board is cooperating with every agency involved. We take environmental responsibility very seriously, and will address all concerns through proper channels. A hand shot up from the 3rd row, Bethany Tran. Why weren't we told about the permit changes? She asked. And why was that garden flattened without notice? Pam's jaw tensed. The board approved all landscaping updates in accordance with... Approved by who? Bethany pressed. Because the HOA page says the last vote was 6 months ago. My basement flooded last week. Ripples moved through the room. Soft murmurs. Agreement. Another voice. You fined me for having a bird bath too close to my mailbox, but you poured cement over a storm drain without a single public meeting? Pam leaned forward, microphone trembling in her grip. We did what we believed was best for the neighborhood. The playground was designed to bring families together. You destroyed a memorial, someone shouted from the back. All heads turned. It was Mr. Langdon, the retired firefighter who used to sit with Sophia in the willow garden. His voice cracked. You didn't even send a letter, just a backhoe and a lie. Pam's face flushed, but she tried to pivot. We had concerns about safety. Then why fake a permit? I said, stepping forward. Every eye turned to me. Why forge a consultant's letter from Arizona? I continued. Why use a non-existent compliance officer to approve a build site flagged as non-permissible back in 2012? Pam opened her mouth. Nothing came out. I kept going. Why was Sophia's plaque, registered under a federal conservation clause, ripped from the ground and buried under recycled mulch? Why did it show up in a plastic evidence bag yesterday morning? Silence. The kind that holds breath. Harold stood. His voice shook, but it didn't waver. The board didn't vote on any of it. The minutes were altered. I tried to speak up. I was told if I kept raising concerns, I'd be replaced. He turned to Pam. You used us. You used me. Angela slowly slid her chair back, stood, quietly stepped behind the curtain divider. She was gone before Pam could say a word. Pam rose, hands trembling now. I will not be tried in a community meeting. This isn't a courtroom. No, I said, but the subpoenas are coming, and next time it will be. A slow handclap echoed from the back, then another, not applause, resolution. Neighbors nodded, murmuring. For the first time in years, they were looking at each other, not at her. I pulled a folded document from my pocket and placed it on the board's table. This is a petition, I said, to dissolve the current board and request emergency oversight under the county's HOA Integrity Review statute. I've got 47 signatures already. We need 51 to call the vote. By the time I turned around, 3 more people had stepped forward to sign. Pam stood frozen at the table, eyes wide, lips parted, but no voice left to command the room. Her power was gone, not taken, returned. Pam didn't stay to watch the signatures pile up. By the time I reached the door, she was already gone, her seat empty, her nameplate still crooked from when she'd slammed her notebook shut and stormed off. The motion to dissolve the HOA board passed that night. 53 signatures in total, verified and notarized by 2 independent witnesses before midnight. Harold submitted the packet to the county oversight committee himself, then quietly stepped down from his role the next morning, not in shame, in peace. 2 weeks later, the playground was fenced off indefinitely. The EPA posted formal notices at all entry points. Site closed pending federal determination. Contractors were seen removing the rubber matting by hand, section by section, careful not to disturb the now monitored stormwater system beneath. Pam's contractors were subpoenaed and the shell landscaping company she funneled funds through dismantled. The IRS got involved. So did the state licensing board. She tried to file a cease and desist on me. She lost that too. But the final blow didn't come from a courtroom. It came from the community itself. The newly appointed interim board, selected by an open vote, announced that the Willow Garden would be fully restored, not as a personal memorial, but as a designated protected community site with permanent conservation, zoning reinstated through a county-backed land trust. They asked me to speak at the rededication. I didn't write a speech. I just stood there, in front of 50 folding chairs, with a plaque in one hand and a small willow sapling in the other. This garden was never about a swing set or a mulch bed, I said. It was about remembering what matters when rules become excuses to erase people. And today, we put her name back where it belongs. I drove the first shovel into the soil myself, same spot she picked years ago. The plaque, restored and resealed, now sits beneath a new stone arch engraved with Sophia's Grove, protected by legacy, reclaimed by community. That phrase wasn't mine. It came from Harold. He called me after the vote, said he was applying to teach environmental ethics at the local college, said he'd spent too long teaching kids to follow rules without questioning who wrote them, said it was time to change that. And as for Angela, she never showed her face again at another board meeting. But a week after Pam's indictment was confirmed, an anonymous envelope arrived on my doorstep with 6 internal emails between Pam and her fake compliance officer. No note, no return address. Quiet redemption still counts. These days, the neighborhood feels lighter. Not perfect, not fixed, but accountable. The fines stopped, the silence stopped. People started talking again, not in whispers, but with conviction. And on quiet mornings, I still walk out to the bench in Sophia's Grove, where the wind cuts through the branches and the ground smells like memory. I sit, I listen, I remember, because that's what she asked me to protect, not the dirt, the dignity. She once told me, if someone ever tries to pave over who we were, don't fight with fists, fight with facts, and never stop walking forward. I didn't, and I never will. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from.